3 million years from Earth, the Red Dwarf podcast thanks for the memory. Its crew, Blake Braswell, a USA native, and Lee Malaby, his English co-host. Additional. Going through the episodes for the first time in ages has made me realise how much the name Goit should be brought back into the common vernacular, and I have made it my task to make it happen. What is up, Smegheads, and welcome to Series 3 of Thanks for the Memory, a Red Dwarf podcast where we rewatch every episode of the BBC comedy show Red Dwarf and discuss them. And I am here with my co-host Blake. Hey, Blake.
Hello, Lee. It is time to venture down into the style, or into changes within the show, even more so as we travel along, as we get into season 3. Episode 3, or sorry, series 3, episode 3. You can tell it's been a little while since I chatted.
Oh, yeah.
Polymorph. I like this Polymorph because Polymorph does make an appearance again. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Polymorph will a version of Polymorph, this concept will show back up. This episode originally aired on November 28th, 1989 over in the UK, and then USA would have followed a few months later. Its synopsis: the Red Dwarf crew encounter the Polymorph, a genetically engineered space mutant that drains the negative emotions from humans that has arrived on board Red Dwarf. You know what we screwed up? We should have done a totally different intro.
I know. I considered it when I watched it last night, yeah.
Yeah, what I didn't say when I rewatched it, and it was, warning, this episode contains scenes that are... Now, that was a gag, right?
I assume so.
I wrote it down. What did it say? This episode contains scenes which may be disturbing for those of a nervous disposition. With a big warning, yes. Red Dwarf on it.
And the guy who did that voiceover is not... This is the first time you've heard this voice on Red Dwarf. It will not be the last. But you will see him next time we hear this voice.
Oh, that's cool.
I can't remember which episode it is, and it's only because I've seen... Because I don't... As I've said to you before, it's so long since we've watched these, and I can't remember a lot of them specifically, but I know the man who is that voice shows up as a character later down the road.
Well, it struck me like when it started, and I was like, oh, last night when I watched it, like you said, I went, we should have done the intro.
I know.
Just like this. But I'm like, is this a joke? I mean, it's not more violent or anything. There is an overt gag we'll get to, but it's more of a sexual innuendo nature than anything. But I just, there's nothing in it that really...
No.
I don't think, you know, except that we do get this creature, which we really haven't had on the show yet.
Which goes along with what you've been saying from the beginning again, that the aliens aren't aliens, it's a man-made creature.
Yeah, everything in the universe ends up coming from Earth,
which I love
that. From humans.
Yeah, I was telling Tracy last night when we were watching it, like what you'd said about there are no aliens in the entire series, or at least from memory. It would be interesting to see if that is true when we go along, but so far it's been true. And she was like, oh, that's interesting. It's clever. I like it, because like you said right from the beginning, it would have been so easy for Red Dwarf to have just become Star Trek in like a comedy Star Trek, which it isn't.
Yeah. No. But it's like right there for it to become one. Although that being said, man, they really do like the Alien franchise and like to make allusions to that.
Oh yeah, this one definitely.
It big time in this show. But this intro is different in that you have this intro with the your warning for those of a nervous disposition, and he's kind of like he's trying to do the voice of like the in a world where two men fight off in a But when the episode starts, it's his voice again narrating like what's inside this containment unit that's floating in space, which I'm like, as soon as it starts, like, yeah, see, I keep talking about effects getting better. Look at this cool space effect. And we'll have more to say about that, even so in the next episode when as they continue to do more effects than they had ever done before.
There are some dodgy effects in this though, and I've got a couple I am going to point out.
Oh yeah. But it's cool that like, or not cool, but just it's different, like him introducing it, it's this thing where it's coming after those that are emotionally crippled, which is to me kind of a gag, but it's not really played for laughs.
Yes.
And then there it is on Red Dwarf, and it does set up this sort of alien invasion, this creature, and then abso-friggin' and it's so out of style for a red dwarf, this intro, like completely, and it's so serious, and you see the hole in the ship, and then bam, the cut to the camera looking through the teeth of the polymorph going around the ground, like it is amazing. It's like kind of worth all the build up. And I love the shots, the polymorph seeing himself covering his eyes, the way he scutters on the ground is clearly like a remote control car that's got this like stuff stretched over it to make it look like a creature. Like it's so good. It's so unabashedly cheesy and just like, is this the best we can do? You almost wonder if like is this the best we can do, or let's lean into how it looks, or screw it, like let's have some fun with this, and not overthink it.
I do think they do that. I do think they understand what Red Dwarf is and do lean into it at times for comedy effect.
Speaking of comedy effect, I would just like, there were a lot of firsts there were a few firsts in this episode.
I know what you've got. The first one I've got written down. Go on.
Groinal attachment.
Yes, the first groinal attachment from Crichton, of course.
Yeah, when he goes in to like clean everything, but there's a whole sci-fi thing when he goes into like, as he's trying to clean up the kitchen, and of course, as we've mentioned in previous episodes, it's now the officers' quarters. The guys finally, after 3 years, said, "Oh, we should move into a better digs, but still stay bunkmates."
Yes.
And it's like was like this medical facility, and just Lister cooking in this medical facility, and the sci-fi nature of like just throwing all this crap into this microwave and shutting it, and then it opens, and then there's just the plated food that's like somehow miraculously been put together. It's like Star Trek's Replicator, except that you just throw crap into it that is roughly the ingredient, shut the door, and then it replicates it into the food that you want.
Although this is my first dodgy effect, and it's one of those things, I think we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, when you notice something wrong in a film or a TV, you can't unsee it, and it's there forevermore. And I've always seen this one. So we have the whole joke of like the chili powder of just enough, not too much, and he's got like the tiny spoon, and then he chucks the spoon away and shoves the whole tub in, and then squirts the chili sauce in and whatever else, and he shuts the door, puts the microwave on, it dings, and he opens the door just a little too quickly, because you see the plates being shoved into the microwave from, it's either underneath or behind it.
I actually think you hear it. I think you hear
I didn't hear it
before the door opens. I feel like you hear the shuffle of it going in. Yeah.
But as he opens the door, you can see them just moving into place. It's funny.
I flippin' love that. With his, what do you call them? Shawarma kebabs?
Oh, yeah. Shawarma kebab Diablo.
Shawarma kebabs. Diablo, that's right.
It's like eating molten lava. They look like two turds on the plate, is what Trace said. What is he eating? Two pieces each?
What is it? So I was like, I don't know that I've seen kebabs that look like that before.
I did think that, but obviously it was for pure comedy value when the polymorph changes into one. There is another effect, sorry Blake, there is another effect that annoys me, and they do it with Crichton quite a lot, and it's the bit when he sucks the penny up.
Oh, yeah.
And they repeat the video, which is fine, but then they sort of morph it into him doing it, and it's so jarring.
I feel like in subsequent seasons, he just does it. Like, he just acts out.
Because they repeat the video where it's like that actual clip repeated, so it feels like he is going in, but then they come out of it into him going and it's so weird. It's so weird.
You might as well just like let it do the video and then stop and be like, oh, I got a penny sucked up in here. Yeah,
that would be perfect. I don't understand why they do it the other way. It's weird.
Well, they will make that mistake with other things. We'll get to that coming up.
This is just us being overcritical, or me being overcritical, I guess.
Well, yes, and I feel like we'll get to that as we go through this. I wrote colostomy bag with chili sauce for the win is my favorite thing out of the list.
They're in the kidney balls next to the colostomy bags with the chili sauce in.
I just love it. It's been 3 million years. They've been cleaned.
So it felt so much. So that whole section with Kat felt like the opening episode again with Yes, Dave. Everybody's dead. They're all dead, Dave, with him like, it's clean. They've been cleaned. It felt exactly the same as that that end scene in the first episode. But the question I need to ask, why the hell on Red Dwarf do they have a syringe for artificially inseminating cows?
I'm so glad you asked, Lee. So, if you're traveling through space and mining, and in this world we have no replicators, it seems like you do in Star Trek, I'm gonna guess that there is a world where there were moo cows somewhere on that ship.
Okay.
And they like bred them for food. That's just my guess. That's my assumption. It's for when he looks at that thing and it says it's for artificial insemination. Yeah. It's been cleaned.
So it's like Snowpiercer. There's a deck on the ship that has like a massive greenhouse and like pigs and cows and sheep and horses.
Yep, there you go. They said they weren't cloning at the time, so
probably
that's what was happening.
Yeah, it's just never explained, and I'm like, that feels a little weird, but all right.
But and him like. I love the audience reaction too, and he's like, "You try to do something nice, you try to do something fancy," and he's got like the urine, whatever you call that thing. Yeah. It just starts pouring the wine. Ooh, very cheeky.
It's even like the cat jokes normally annoy me a little bit, but the one in this one, he comes in, and is like, "Oh, what's that smell? Oh, it's me. I smell gorgeous," and I love that joke. It's brilliant.
Yeah, well, and that whole, like you said, that whole scene feels very classic dwarf so far. Man, I'm not eating this. It's not a dinner. It's an autopsy.
Yeah, it does, because that's. And I alluded to this before we started recording. That I have stated right from the beginning that I have an affinity for the first two seasons because they were the ones that I watched the most. I'm starting to realize getting through season 3, and not that I'm not enjoying them, but I'm not enjoying them as much as those first two seasons. And I think, again, like I've said before, those first two seasons, because they didn't have a budget, they relied very heavily on the writing of the show. And it feels better for it, in my opinion.
See, I think this is a bridge season because they are taking large swings at things they want to do with these guys and can't quite. And it's why, as I've told you, I thoroughly enjoy seasons 4, 5, and 6.
Yes.
Because then they start figuring out how to nail with what they have these concepts they're going for. Because, well, this one is such a good concept it will come back. But the idea of this is great, and there's all these good Red Dwarf moments in between, like the autopsy dinner and stuff like that are like just like great Red Dwarf moments.
Yes,
and I think season 3, and it's the one I don't have a ton of memory of. As a matter of fact, the episode following this, which we'll talk about later, I don't think I'd ever seen. I think that's one of those I had missed in my watching.
I love that. I love that we're getting episodes that you haven't seen at all.
Yeah, and like it started. I went, oh no, I don't know this one at all. But I see, and we've said this before with other things. Oh, I see where things are going. I see where this is coming, because there's just stuff in seasons 4, 5, and 6, especially 6. I just really love that. It's all starting here where they figure out how do we add the sci-fi adventure element. That sounds I don't like saying it like that, because that sounds more cliche than it is, but just I think for me it even makes sense. These guys have been living for a while together. It was at the beginning, we'll keep Lister alive, he's the last human, what are we doing here? And now it's like I don't know, like why would these guys go on adventures? And they don't really try to go on them, but they're bored. They're bored out of their mind, and so it's like the cast or the story of the crew are taking slightly bigger swings at things. And then the crew behind the scenes of the actual show itself, the creators, are taking bigger swings at things. To use Star Trek as a parallel would be like, there's the episodes of Star Trek that are we got in a battle and our core is damaged, and and we don't have a lot of money to do the special effects of the battle, so we'll just go ahead and start with the core is damaged, the ship's going to blow up, we got 45 minutes to figure it out, right? And then you've got episodes where it's like we have met the proto being that explains why every creature is a bipedal, and it is the initial creatures that ever lived in this galaxy. There's like it's really wild and out there, right? And you can see where Red Dwarf is going to go. You know, and again, when they go wild and out there, they do try to rein it in the like, here's this polymorph creature that feeds on negative emotions. It's a crazy concept like an alien. Well, no, it's actually it's genetically modified. It's from Earth, or it's from humans that made it. But these big swings and like these sort of adventures, for lack of a better term, become such a thing in the subsequent seasons that I love, because they're just good at them, you know, especially once they're starbugging around a whole bunch. Because
it would have to, because otherwise they couldn't continue how 1 and 2 were, because it would just become repetitive, I guess. They'd need to have bigger concepts.
Yeah, I think you'd get like seasons 3 or series 3 or 4 out of that maybe. But like, yeah, by doing this, you can just see where they're like, oh, you know what else we could do? And it's doesn't always quite hit as well as, and this is an interesting thing they did, and good on them, which is not what happens these days. So series 1 is good. It's great, as a matter of fact, for setting the groundwork. But series 2 has some really standouts because they sort of figure out that formula, right? And I feel like series 3
is the same thing.
It's the same thing. It's like, there is some stuff coming that this will all be not based on lore wise, but like you can just see like they're building they're getting better at doing this kind of story. And then I think we'll see as we move forward, it's like, oh yeah, there you go. Like they figured it out now. Because it does feel like a start over.
Yeah, because you could argue that like we said about Cat coming in, that it took them a long time to figure his place in the group. I suppose they're doing that with Crichton now a little bit, and then obviously with Holly being replaced by Hilly, they're finding her place in it. So of writing it is still Holly, but it's slightly different.
It's funny you say that, because the next thing I wrote on my notes was, this is where they start to figure out what Robert Lewin is for Crichton. And it's the Crichton's over-explaining of how much he's insulted Rimmer's mother when he sees the video of her. That side of Crichton, like he does a really good job with that, and that becomes a thing moving forward.
Okay.
You know, that's like leaned on much more in the subsequent seasons, where he screws up and he's just like, and just over explains like C-3PO, you know, as to what he's done, and digs himself a bigger hole, which is on my follow-up viewing is what I was like, oh, you know what? I should relax a little bit, because this is like, you know, there was like a series 1 episode that was like, this is good, but man, the pacing is off, but I see where it's going. And I think that's kind of where some of the stuff in series 3 is. That being said, there is some classic stuff in here that is like, I think, great bits. When that sausage comes to life on Lister's plate, and it's the cheesy effect of the sausage wrapping around his neck and kicking his ass all over the place, and then turns into his boxer briefs that start shrinking and crushing him. And
which I have to ask, does that mean at that point Lister was walking around with a robe on and a vest and nothing else?
And nothing else.
Why?
Like, probably, I guess.
But then the weird thing is, when Crichton pulls them off him and he flings them on the top bunk, and Rimmer comes in and he's like, where are they, Hall? Holly's looking, not Holly, Crichton. Where are they, Crichton? It's like, I can't see them. You can distinctly see them on the bed over Crichton's left shoulder. They're there where he's looking for them. Those boxes are there. And he's like, I can't see them. They've disappeared. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're there, over your left shoulder.
That gag, though, of him ripping off Lister's pants.
Oh, yeah.
And it just looks like Crichton is humping Lister. As it's just the sound of, that's why you gotta love a live audience. The sound of the live audience witnessing this, and then Rimmer's face when he comes in, makes sense. You'd bonk anything, won't you?
And there's that totally 1980s British phrase, bonk. You don't hear that anymore, but you will bonk anything, won't you?
Well, I can't say I'm surprised. Yeah. It's like that moment. Oh, pardon me. That moment is golden. It's such a good bit. And to have done that coming out of the Gronil attachment and everything else.
Yeah.
It's so delightful.
Just going back slightly to when Rimmer's watching his home videos and he's like, oh, brothers, we were the four musketeers. Well, the three musketeers. This tells you everything you need to know about Rimmer, because the wording's very specific. He said, the three musketeers, they always let me play the Queen of Spain. Not made him, they let me play the Queen of Spain. Like, he wanted to be the Queen of Spain, and so they let him.
That video, too, of the kids, like, tying him down, and he's got jelly on his face, and they got, like, a can of ants or whatever they had written on it.
It reminds me, it kind of goes back to Better Than Life, when they're buried up to their heads.
Oh, yeah.
With jam and ants on them. You're like, that's interesting. I wonder if that was a purposeful nod back to that.
So that's where that comes from. That's why he did that to them.
It would make sense.
I do, and Crichton's bit in here when he does his like a Piscine, he starts like trashing the mom is so good. Oh my god, I love it. And his comeback and like, well, I'll see myself trout. No, sir.
He said something else as well. Fish. He said something about fish. I can't remember what it was now.
Well, he's just got such like, that is such a cheesy gag, but there's something about the android lets you do almost these dad joke things.
Yes.
That you couldn't do with a normal person, right? Like, but you could do it with the android. The android's smart, but it's not socially smart, as it were.
Yeah, he's the physical embodiment of Holly. It's like everything. I mean, he's not from Red Dwarf, but like Holly's the ship's computer who has an IQ of 6,000 but is an idiot. And then Crichton is this android that is incredibly smart as well, but is an idiot.
Right. He's a service droid, which means he's super smarter than anybody else in this crew right now. But
yeah, he doesn't. When it comes to common sense, not a clue.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that they'll build on too. Is like his character gets to evolve or kind of get a backbone, or whatever you want to call it. Do we? I mean, you need to say. I feel like you have something you need to say, because I feel like we're getting to a spot where Rimmer is having a conversation with Holly. I think it's just prior to the underwear bit. Does it bring our counter back?
Goit, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I wrote my intro joke before I noticed there was a goit in this episode. So then when I rewatched it last night, I was like, oh my God, it's perfect. Yes. But the first one in quite a while.
The first watch through, I scared my wife to death because I went, oh, Goit back! And he said Goit. He said Goit.
I love it so much. It's still it should be used as much as it was in series 1, 100%. But yes, so good.
The more we talk about it, the more I think I do really like this episode. The whole thing about Listerman snakes is my scariest thing ever. What's your other? And then this creature comes out of the trash can, and it's our look at the polymorph. And I just finished watching Thing the other night.
Okay.
I watched that on November 5th in the evening here in America. Make of that what you will, but that's what I chose to watch that evening.
On bonfire night over here, where we're all blowing things up. Yeah.
I watched John Carpenter's The Thing, and while I feel like there's obvious alien creature nods to this, The Thing is kind of in this as well, because in the film The Thing, it can try to assume other people look like them and stuff like that. So it does kind of feel like it's this amalgamation of The Thing and Alien. And I like the idea that like there's a world where this isn't an alien. Humans made it, and these scientists were like, my favorite movie is The Thing. I love Alien. Hey, let's see if we can genetically modify something to be like that.
But the question is, why did they create, like, what was the thinking behind creating an organism that can suck out people's emotions? What was the point? What was the thinking behind that?
I think it was, and I feel like this might be explained in one of the books a bit better, but the idea would be this was like a humane way to battle, and it pulled out negative emotions, and you could use it as a bioweapon, but then to Crichton's point, it went insane. And it couldn't stop feeding or whatever. But like that's the idea.
Because when it comes to Lister, removing his fear wasn't, if you're that creature, removing his fear is probably not the best thing to do.
Right. I abso-friggin-lutely love the sucker on Lister's head. I love the little, and that reoccurring like effect of this right on top of the word.
Which is obviously taken straight from Alien with the inner jaw.
Yeah, the inner jaw, and then but I adore No Fear Lister.
Yeah.
He's Craig Charles he does that so well. I mean, it's just this angry Liverpudlian that is like you've looked at him by accident in a bar and he's just ready to fight. Like, oh God, he's so good.
When Crichton goes to inject him and he's like, what's that? It's like, oh, it's just something to calm you down. It's like, are you starting something, pal? Do you want some? It's
Come
just
on, you slags.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But then he uses a word, right, that for all of our American listeners, it's a word that when Americans use it, it drives me up the wall because you guys cannot pronounce it properly. So,
well, you guys also say pasta the reverse way.
Because it's pasta. It doesn't have an R in it. It's not pasta. It's pasta. It depends. To be fair, that depends which part of our country you are talking to someone from. The north, we have a hard vowel, so most of ours it's a hard A. Whereas you go further down south, it's that softer Queen's English.
It's the bastard versus bastard.
Yes, exactly. Which is interesting because it's funny you bring that up because Lister being northern, it's annoyed me a little bit right the way through because he's a Scouser, which is Liverpool, which is north. It's not true north like I am, but they would generally have a hard A. And yet he says bastard. But yet in other things, he'll say dance or it's weird. I can't figure that out. It's very strange. So what he says is, we just need to get out there and twat it, right? Most Americans pronounce that it's not a nice word either, by the way. I'm surprised back in 1989 that they were allowed to use the word twat because it is a word that not a lot of people like of it. It's not as bad as that other one that seems to be a lot more common in the English language right now and used a lot less sparingly than it used to be. About next Tuesday. That's as far as we'll go. It is not a pleasant word, not one that you would use in polite conversation back then. But most Americans pronounce it twat. And it winds me up some chronic because the word is twat.
It's definitely not spelled with an O. So
yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand. I have taught many Americans to pronounce it properly.
So is the phrase, because I definitely wrote that one down somewhere. Yeah, I said we get out there and twat it. Is that used as a verb?
Yeah.
I love it. It's so great.
Twat someone in the face. It means you hit them in the face, basically.
Oh my God, it was. As soon as that scene happened, I looked at Kara. I was like, "That's going to be in the show." So he's going to talk about that one
because it's one of those things. Whenever Tracy and I are watching American TV shows and they call people a twat, and it's like, it's not twat, right? There's no O in there. It's an A. Just. And then I had like so many conversations with Americans like that's not, the TWA and twa is not, you can't, like it's not letters that should go together to be pronounced that way. And I'm like, but it is, because that's what it is.
His delivery is so good, and I just love the realm he lives. Like he's too good at it.
Yeah,
and I really, really, really like Angry Lister. Does this lead us to? I wrote first, but I can't remember. Was it in another episode? But is this our first Bazookoids?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Okay, because I feel like the word might have been used. I can't. But anyway, I wrote Bazookoids, which are the big giant gun under the arm thing with the backpack. Although I think in subsequent episodes, the backpack disappears for mobility's sake.
I think they lent very heavily on the not the pulse rifles, but the ones that Vasquez and what's his face have in Aliens. Like the big,
smart rifles.
Yeah, the ones on the like big elbow thing attached to the back. I think that's what. Because, Aliens will have been out at that point. I felt that was like, we need a bit of aliens in here to tone down the alien and the thing in there, so we're going to give them these bazookoids.
Well, and they haven't had like blasters. And if I remember correctly, in the story wise, I even think the bazookoids. I might have this wrong. This might be from the book. I feel like they aren't like necessarily weapons. They could be used for mining and stuff, and they're like converted over to use as weapons on the ship.
It seems weird because they're called bazookoids, which leads me to think that that's a like bazooka. It's a weapon, isn't it? I guess, but yeah, right. I don't know why they would. I suppose if you're going to foreign planets, you never know what you're going to encounter, so they do have to have some sort of.
There is a thing in later episodes where it's clear, like Crichton and Holly are retrofitting things to be stuff that it wasn't, and I don't know if that's what this is, but I mean, because obviously it's got heat-seeking. Blue balls, for lack of a better term, that are like part of the gag and stuff as well. And
they're very slow moving, aren't they? I will point that out. When they're chasing Cat, it's like, really? Like a bullet flies faster than that. They're like, if you can outrun the projectile from that gun, it's not very effective, is it?
Well, one would argue that in Star Wars, if the Empire just dropped the lasers and picked up guns that shot bullets, they'd be doing way better. Yeah. They move a little faster, I think. But I do love that whole bazookoid sequence. I love the guys getting in there. They've all got their guns. They're like ready to roll. And the whole outfit of Cat, his space hero, action hero outfit is flipping amazing. That outfit looks like when they would put on the cover of either a Nintendo 8-bit or even an Atari 2600 game, this really cool dude that, of course, in the game looked like 7 pixels smashed together. But like that would be the cool 80s dude with his long hair and like the little band across his forehead. It's such a classic 80s looking like sci-fi action hero guy outfit. I just love it.
And that very much feels like it was drawn straight out of Alien, like going the first time in Alien where they go to find it and Brett gets killed. It feels that.
My wife, sorry, as we were watching, last night, she quietly goes, after 3 million years, wouldn't cardboard biodegrade?
That's quite a good effect, that, though, when it goes through the cardboard box, to be fair.
It is, yeah. They actually legitimately burn that thing. And I do love, because they're running through this, like they're in the cargo hold, and it's just, they just built a labyrinth out of cardboard boxes. And I'm like, oh, why did you say that? Because now I can't stop thinking about
I never noticed that.
Like, yeah, the paper probably... I mean, it's not like there's organisms to eat it. Maybe it's hermetically sealed. Maybe I'm thinking about this too hard.
But I was like, yeah, but it is
weevils. Well, and then of course, like Cat picks up one of the boxes and it's completely empty.
Yes.
Just shy of whatever pyro is in there to burn the holes on it. But that effect is great. And like, him running away and then locking the heat-seeking balls in that airlock or whatever it is. And I mean, again, another just great classic Cat thing. Then this beautiful woman comes out and goes, oh my gosh, you're so brave. Thanks. Hey, you got to stick with me. Yeah. It's dangerous over here. There's a thing that could turn into anything. It could be anyone.
Yeah. And it would feel stupid. It's like, you're not that dumb, but it's a woman and it's Cat. And you're like, okay, anybody else you would have gone, there's no way you would fall for that. Cat, you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, and I love that we're going to separate Cat off because he needs to have this moment because it's the only way that it makes sense.
Yeah.
Which of course, as they lovingly go in to fight, I love that this ends with Cat gets his emotions, Crichton gets his guilt removed, and then you actually realize that's one of the best parts of Crichton. That like.
Yes.
Over guilt, just like I said about him over explaining about insulting the mom, because as soon as Crichton does lose the guilt, like Lister loses his fear, and it's funny.
Yeah.
Crichton or loses his guilt, and you're like, oh, you are not interesting anymore. That's actually even to go back to his first appearance of like, they're dead. Are you sure?
Yeah.
I was only gone for 5 minutes or whatever, it is so good. And you're like, oh man. And obviously in the episode, he's only that way for a couple of minutes. And then kind of same with Cat. You take out his vanity and it's not fun.
But then here's the question. As a hologram, how does the sucker attach to Rimmer's head? right? That's the first thing. Secondly, he doesn't have emotion because he's a hologram. And then Crichton is an android who doesn't have emotion. He has an emotion chip. It's not real emotion. So how do you suck digital emotion? So I have issues. I get it. It's just, this is me just being overcritical of a comedy show. But technically, there's no way it would have been able to get Crichton or Rimmer at this point.
If I can paraphrase Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I just saw a thing this week, and I went, that applies to this episode.
Okay.
Where he talks about consciousness, and it is a construct that we do not fully understand yet. It could be a simple thing as your brain works enough to, but he was like, but consciousness is a construct that, like, there could be more that we don't understand of how consciousness works, and our ability to study it. So I'm going to go off this, that all emotions are real. And so Rimmer's full of them, even though he's a hologram.
Yeah.
So it can totally pull from him. And then for Crichton, I think that's what's quote unquote wrong about Crichton is he's like Data from Star Trek. He is building emotions. And obviously guilt is at least one that was programmed very heavily into him to make sure that, that he does everything he's supposed to the best way that he can. Also, I don't care because I need, I need beatnik,
Rimmer.
hippie, Rimmer.
Yeah.
Like, I need give Quiche a chance as a t-shirt and someone must sell it.
Oh, without a doubt. I've no doubt you could find it quite easily.
So I wrote my character standouts were Angry Lister. Every time he opens his mouth, we'll go down to I'm going to strap on a nuclear warhead to my head, nut it into oblivion. It's one of my favorite lines I've ever heard. But also Activist Rimmer, I guess we'll call him, is so good. Both of those are just outstanding performances. Rimmer's whole body language, I know this isn't a video pod, but like the way he moves his hands I think we're going to move forward, and he puts his like his hands touch and he makes like almost a semicircle with his arms as he talks about moving things forward and like does this little undulation with his body while holding his
it's like a history teacher.
Yes. Like someone that became a history professor or a philosophy professor, maybe more so, and was like, well, I'm a professor now, so I'm going to go make sure I go buy the coats that have the little elbow patches. I have to, like they basically, I had a professor like this in college too, where it was like, I'm going to assume the character, basically. You're like, no, this is like from a movie. And you're like, I'm a professor now, so this is what I'm going to do. Like, this isn't really you. And but he does that. And his whole and then we're going to hit it with a leaflet campaign.
Yes.
And signs, mutant creatures, no thank you.
Oh, see, that brings up, so I think it was in the trivia. So I can't remember so in the trivia, this was, on the DVD commentary, apparently Craig Charles says that the show received hate mail because of, and I can't remember what it stands for. Let me look it up before we go forward.
Wait, do you mean the name of the his coalition that he made?
Yes. So it's the Committee for the Liberation and Integration of Terrifying Organisms and Their Rehabilitation into Society. But the problem is the anagrams, the what's the word? It's not an anagram.
The abbreviation
would be clitoris. And apparently they got hate mail because of that joke. One woman wrote that she was so appalled by the joke that she would never watch the show again, and was also embarrassed that she had to explain what a clitoris was to her 8-year-old daughter. And it's funny, but I think back, like I say, I'll have been 14 or 15, I think, when I first watched this. I'm assuming I knew what that was back then, but I've never have been like, ooh, they said clitoris on the television.
It's so good because he starts spelling it, and I don't know if I just remembered the joke, but he's like, we're gonna call it. But my brain started trying to make the abbreviation. It's the first time I saw it, as soon as he started talking, and I was like, oh my god, that's so good.
This is what I mean about Red Dwarf, though. It's such a weird amalgamation of humor because there's times when the jokes are so puerile. And so,
like the gag with like looking like he's humping Lister, right? Taking the polymorph from him, right? You have that, and then you have like really smart jokes about Or then smart jokes in dumb ways about Lister being hungry and maroon, and so he's got the books of Sir Francis Bacon and all these people. You know what I mean?
Or like going back to what was the one I was thinking of there? Just stupid jokes. There's one in this where they're like, "Oh, the heat seekers. Why are they singling us out? Because androids don't give out heat, and holograms don't." It's like you oversold that because everyone knows why anyway. But it's like this weird little, and then there's this which is quite an adult joke. I wonder if it would have been funnier if they hadn't have said. But the worst thing about that is that it's clitoris. I wonder if they'd have just said the name of the, but we had to, like, basically they go in and go, it's, the coalition for blah, 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 whatever it was. I can't remember now. But we couldn't use that one. And then just left it at that. I wonder if that would have been
Or just say something like, the only problem is, of course, it's abbreviation. And then moving on.
Yes.
Or whatever.
Rather than actually spell it out. I wonder, people have picked up on it? Maybe now in subsequent viewings you would do, but at the time, would you have? Yeah,
would you have?
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to remember. We brought it up a couple times throughout the show so far, that it was at a time you don't rewatch episodes unless you happen to catch them on a rerun. And, you remember this time of TV, Lee, where you're like, oh, it's a rerun? Is the series over? Did they get to the end? Like, you didn't even think of it that way.
No.
You're like, are there no more new episodes like right now? And you don't even know if it's coming back or what it's doing, which I love. One of our listeners wrote in talking about that, being American as well, and never knowing, like, is this going to come on again tonight?
It's very strange, isn't it, to think back to the world that was like where now if a series starts, you know how many episodes they're going to be, and it's strange. Or you could easily go and find it if you didn't know. Back then, it was like, how did you even know?
Well, and so I think sometimes there is like a hit that they're sort of hit you over the head with the joke because they feel like they've only got one shot at it. I mean, in theory, this is a world where you could have been flicking through the channels and been like, what is this?
Yeah.
And started watching at that point. You know what I mean? And so, which I basically kind of is what I did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's like I think you've alluded to it before, where some episodes and some jokes just needed another run at them just to tighten certain things up. We've said it before, where jokes sometimes like this, they could be over-egged a little bit, or you didn't need to spell it out, just leave it kind of suggested.
Listen to the audience. We had a joke, what was it, last week or whatever, where one of the last episodes, remember, the listener didn't need to say whatever it is he said. Oh, it was the No Wonder Dogs.
Lick the testicles.
Lick their own testicles. Audience dies laughing, and he's like, it's to get the taste of food in the mouth.
You didn't need that.
Yeah, with the audience dying laughing, done.
Yeah,
moving on. You know what I mean? And this kind of I think sort of like falls into that. Into that.
It would be interesting to take that section out and just have it. We came up with what is the word? It's not abbreviation. I had the word there. I actually Googled that word, and now I can't remember what it is. And
it's acronym, right?
There you go. It is acronym.
Yeah.
So if he'd have just gone, so we set up the Committee for the Liberation and Integration of Terrifying Organisms and their Rehabilitation in Society, but of course we couldn't use that name, because then you would, as a viewer, you're somehow having to find that right. Why couldn't they use it, and somehow try and remember what the acronym was, or remember on a subsequent viewing if you happen to catch it a year later down the line. We need to try and figure out that joke, or like discuss it in the playground with your schoolmates. Why couldn't they use that? I think it potentially would have been better if they hadn't. And then obviously they wouldn't have got hate mail either, and that poor woman wouldn't have had to explain what a clitoris was to her 8-year-old daughter.
I do appreciate, though, getting to hear Professor Rimmer say clitoris, though. That has its own delight to it.
I never expected us to... This is the thing that we've talked about the most on this episode so far, by the way.
Probably, yes. Well, he's just, it's his, being an impressionist and stuff. He's just such a good performer, like taking on these, again, it's the hand gestures and things he does where he puts them together with a two thumbs up and sort of tries to squeeze the shoulder to look smaller and not threatening to say how we're going to attack this beast with protests, perhaps some street theater. God, so good. I misquoted Lister earlier. It's strap the nuclear warhead to my strap the nuclear bomb, whatever, to my forehead, and I'll nut the smegger to oblivion.
Yes.
God, that's also a T-shirt right there.
By the way, if you Google give Quiche a chance T-shirts, there are hundreds of them.
Okay, I'm gonna need to get one of those.
Amazon is your friend.
That's just one of those be great to wear, because if anyone ever walks by and goes, dude, you're like, hey.
Yeah. I always remember a similar thing, going to, funny enough, Alton Towers years and years, like probably 20 years ago, and seeing a guy with a Vote for Pedro t-shirt on, and I had no idea what it was. Not a clue. Fast forward 10 years and I've watched Napoleon Dynamite. Coolest t-shirt ever. Yeah,
it is. And this one, now that I'm looking at it, yeah, the way that you do it is you just have the super simple one that's just the gray with the iron-on letters. Yeah. Like, that's ridiculous.
And it's funny for the average person who has no idea what it is. They're just like, oh, that's cool. And then for the odd person that's like, oh my God, Red Dwarf.
Yeah, you're like, what are you, hipster? What is this? Give Keisha a chance. Like, yeah.
Perfect.
Oh my God. Oh, sorry. I was looking at my note for my next one, but it is Kara mentioning the cardboard boxes. I do like the battle plan, trying to draw it where it's like, well, let it eat me, and you guys can kill it. Because while it's knackered after eating me, then you guys can take care of it. And then of course, and when you do something fun and cheesy, like it was fun to see, to go back a little bit, Kat do basically a Scooby-Doo escape from the Bazookoid heat seekers, as they even literally do the Scooby-Doo thing of going in and out doors and stuff. And then in the end, that dumb gag saves the day. It's actually kind of great. That's good writing. You've got it all there, and it all came back around. Did you have any good trivia we should look at?
I got a few. So from obviously this is all from the polymorph turns into the following in order, and this isn't just that beginning, because obviously when you first see it, you said it rocks up to the mirror and kind of changes, and it's bop, 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 and ends up as the rabbit. So in order, we have a teddy bear, a bucket and spade, a potted plant with red flowers, a yellow toy, a dump truck, a China flamenco doll, a white old-fashioned telephone. I love how they have to put an old-fashioned telephone.
So the kids know.
An elephant ornament, a hat, a baseball glove and ball, a boxer action figure, a toy drum, a yellow workman's lantern, a red toy Volkswagen Beetle, a roller skate, a traffic cone. Interesting. Traffic cone, that's a Red Dwarf staple there. A lampshade, an inflatable penguin, a yellow piggy bank, a Ken doll, that's weird, a blue plastic chamber pot, an alarm clock, a rubber ball, a white trainer, a tennis shoe. Not really what the difference between a white trainer and a tennis shoe is. For all you American listeners, that is a white sneaker. A saucepan, a yellow koosh ball, a scrubbing brush, a silver pail, a fish bath toy, a statue of Hindu god, a light bulb, a toy horn, a sponge ball, a red and black striped sock, a fluffy white rabbit, a basketball, a kebab, red boxer shorts, a snake, and Jenny, who was the woman that hits on Kat, and of course Rimmer and Rimmer's mum.
Yeah, another great performance too. I do love Holly. She calls him, and I can't remember if this is the first time, whatever, where she says, don't get angry, when he's like, you've had my mum. And Rimmer's mom is laying on Lister, and she says, don't fall for it, Arn. He's trying to make you mad. Has anyone called him Arn yet?
I don't know.
That feels so right coming from her. It feels like a very her version of Holly thing.
Yeah, it's weird because it kind of came into my head when I was talking about it earlier, about kind of introducing Hilly and Crichton, because I wonder if they changed the writing for her, because really they shouldn't have. They should still have been writing Norman Lovett lines for Hetty Hayridge, because in that initial scroll for the beginning of Series 3, it is still Holly, just with her face.
Right.
And I wonder, I'd love to, this is where eventually we need to get Rob Grant and Doug Naylor on, whether they remember or not at this point. But it would be interesting to see whether they still wrote Holly as Holly, or whether they did change it specifically for her.
Well, and I could hear his version of Holly calling him Arn as he gets more familiar with him. Because he does call him Dave.
Yeah,
he doesn't call him Lister. You know what I mean? So I heard it and went, I'd have to go back and look to see. Does Holly, either version, ever call him Arn? But it just stuck in my head.
That's interesting, actually. That's probably something I could find fairly easy, to be fair.
But I like, there's a lot of, it's funny when things have first. Cat has a lot of first. Like he called Lister Dave in one of the previous episodes, like the first time he had done it or something. I feel like what's your rating of this episode?
See, I originally wrote a 6 because I think we talked about this before we started recording. When I watched it the first time, I was like, because I knew this was a big episode. If you talk to anyone who's a Red Dwarf fan, Polymorph is an episode that everybody talks about. And I was like, I was a little disappointed with it. And then I watched my seconds, because I've started doing what you've been doing. So normally, when we were doing series 1 and 2, I would do my third watch of the episodes that we'd be recording, and then I'd wait till maybe a week before we were getting ready to record the new ones. Now as soon as we've recorded these two, I'll probably go and watch the next 2 episodes in the next few days, and then closer to the next recording, I'll go in and watch my last 2. And so I probably watched this and the next one like 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point, and I was like, it was okay. And then I had my second viewing earlier this week, and I was like, I enjoyed them much more. And then I watched them again last night, and I'm kind of like, they're okay. I think it's that thing, you've kind of said it now, it feels like I've got a reason for it to be there, because it feels like they are bridging that the cool tight writing of series 1 and 2 moving into those sort of bigger concept ideas that we're going to see moving forward, and this is that bridge series of amalgamating those two and finding out what works from where we want to be and mixing with what we have done to try and make it all work. And it definitely feels like that. So I'm going to stick with a 6. I enjoyed it, but it's not my favorite episode.
I think you can see them taking this. You can see the show like breathing a little bit and going, "Ooh, this show is bigger than the confines of the ship," which is interesting because things will change the ship later too. But it's there are. The idea of like, here's these 6 spots we go to in the ship, and how's life on the dwarf? And it's like, well, we could keep doing that, but we kind of did that. Like, what else is there to say other than we keep annoying each other and yada yada? So now let's take that relationship and put it into a. And I didn't think about it until I said it on this episode with you. Like, these guys have to be getting bored, so you do feel like there'd be like a, well, let's go. What is this? What's this? Let's go see what this is. Because like. It's just the same kind of stuff. And so they get into these adventures I kind of quite enjoy. And this particular episode definitely starts to push that into like, hey, there's like other stuff we can do. There's a bit of like action, but if it's Red Dwarf action. They look all cool, but then they're absolutely wretchedly terrible with their bazookoids going around and trying to be tough, I wrote... because I am one of those people that's like Polymorph is like a classic episode. Yeah. It is a thing that will give birth to other concepts, both a polymorph, but I also think it inspires other things that'll come that I quite enjoy. I gave it an 8, but I gave a 10 for a couple of 10 level gags. Is what I wrote. One of them being yanking the pants off of Lister with Crichton is just delightful. It's when you do puerile humor, but you justify it so well and realistically. Like, this alien thing is on his crotch, choking the life out of him from below. Let me get this off of you. So it's not like they're being so serious about getting the thing off, and it looks so ridiculous. And that is my favorite kind of puerile, cheesy humor, where we're going to do this. It's going to be very hokey, but we have completely legitimized why what is happening. And just Rimmer's button of coming in and like zero reaction at all is so much funnier than I think what you would have gotten out of him series 1 or 2.
Yes.
Where he's like, he just like, yep. like I've caught you in here humping a vacuum before, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed there was like a really good effect in this as well. That the last note I've got down. So when the polymorph comes, I can't remember where it is, but it comes through the faucet, as you Americans call it, the tap.
Yeah.
It's really, really good effect.
Wait, what do you call it?
A tap.
Oh, we call it a faucet or a spigot.
Yeah, so we're going to have this I'm going to have this conversation with you then, Blake. It's got nothing to do with Red Dwarf, but if you go to a restaurant in the US and you want some water that is not from the bottle, what do you ask for?
I'll just take a tap water, please.
A tap water, but you don't call it a tap.
Nope.
So why? You call it a faucet, but it's
call it a faucet.
Tap water. You ask for tap water, but that tap water comes out of a faucet. So which one is it?
Spigot's outside. Who is it? Is it Canada that flat water? That's always what they call it or whatever.
So it's always confused me of why you guys refer to water that comes out of the faucet as tap water, but you don't call it a tap.
Well, we just say out of the tap. I mean, like it's not a foreign term to call it a tap for us, because we'll say tap water out of the tap, but it isn't. But we call it the device. We always call it a faucet.
Yeah, it's weird.
But when referring to the water,
yeah, why? Because it should be. It doesn't make sense. It's another one of those Americanisms that's always wound me up.
Eventually, when we're done entirely with all the series, I feel like our other pod is going to be, two nations separated by a common language.
Yeah,
that's our pod.
There's tons of them.
Yeah. But from a southern guy and a northern guy in UK, I feel like there's fun to be had in that.
I remember having a conversation with my other co-hosts on my other podcast who were both American. And when I was laughing about our youngest, when they'd asked for 2 rations of bacon, I was like, no, they're not rations, they're rashers. And the pair of them, there was just silence. And I was like, it's funny, right? And they were like, what did you just call them? Rasher. That's what a slice of bacon is, a rasher. And I was like, I have never heard that before.
Yep. That's definitely not an American thing. I'm familiar with that term, but only because of the friends I have.
Yeah. A rasher. And they're like, no idea. I have no idea what that is. And I'm like, oh, okay.
But I do. I give this an 8 with some 10 gags. Part of this is built on where it will go. Oh, and the ability to change how the characters perform, which is a thing that will reoccur throughout the rest of the series, whether it's they have a physical change that makes them different, or they are themselves stuck in a different situation, which is not even just referring to the next episode, but like that happens again in other episode stuff too. But it's smart. It's kind of like, I might have said something like this prior as an allusion, but it's kind of the Doctor Who thing. Like, I know the original idea was just that, hey, this show is popular in the 60s, but we got to move on to how do we do this? And hey, we have this idea. What if the Doctor just regenerates? And they literally just threw that out of it was fixing a problem, right? But it gives this show a thing where it's great because it can reinvent itself. You know what I mean? Like, and it keep it fresh, even though the concept is similar or whatever. And they do that with I feel like that's kind of a little what's happening with the show. Like, we'll move into the officers' quarters. We'll get the boys out of the ship a little bit more. The maroon thing. We're on a planet now. You know what I mean? Like, your Starbug becomes more of a set than it ever was. So you definitely feel like there are these changes coming in. They're allowing themselves to reinvent themselves a little bit. It's just taking a second to get their feet under them as they expand their world a little bit.
Because they've completely forgotten about just chucking Lister in stasis and going back to Earth.
Yep, gone. Done.
Like, we're just going to accept it now. It's not going to happen. Yep,
just moving on. I can't wait for... So you really didn't know the polymorph comes back?
No. Like I said, beyond series 2, I have memories of things. And as I said, when I'm watching these, I'm remembering them. But if you ask me, if you threw a series 4 episode 5 at me, it's titled this, the chances of me remembering what that episode is about is probably 0. But when I get to that episode and I watch it, I'll probably go, oh yeah, I remember this.
I'm so curious. I can't wait to see what your reactions are going to be, because mine are just so fond of like 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
So
I've enjoyed already that there's episodes that you haven't even seen.
Well, I mean, that's a good segue for us to get to our next episode. Does that wrap up this one?
I think so. And we've actually talked a lot more than I thought about it. It's weird. We talk about some really random things where if you sat down before this and go, Blake, what topics do you think we're going to talk about on the episode Polymorph? A whole 10 minutes about a clitoris joke and the word twat, and not the two things that probably would come up.
Oh, goodness. That's flawless.
Yes. So, as I said, that is going to wrap up the podcast, of course. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dwarf Memory, and Twitter at Dwarf_Memory for any show updates and any other crap I decide to post.
And please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you can, and email us your comments to dwarfmemory@gmail.com. The next episode we've alluded to will be discussing, will be Series 3, Episode 4, Body Swap. So make sure to watch before you join for the next episode. Whoo-wee! What am I wearing?
Oh, how can you ever forgive me, sir? Naturally, I will commit suicide immediately.
Hey, we were all a bit whacked out there.
Oh, you can say that again.
Come on, let's go and clean up. If I don't get into some coordinated evening wear, I'm going to have to resign my post as most handsome guy on this podcast.